We are going to follow the money.
Everything you need to know can be understood with this simple phrase: follow the money. And believe me, that's what's happening.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Welcome to College Sports Follow the Money, an all-new podcast diving into the critical issues surrounding the big business of college sports. I'm Andrew Monaco, joined by former president of Texas A&M University and former chancellor at the University of Missouri, Dr. Bowen Loftin, and former vice president and general manager of Fox Sports Southwest, Jon Heidtke. From NIL to the transfer portal and opt-outs, to the college football playoff, conference realignment, and more, we tackle the key issues facing college athletics today and into the future.
I need to feel you, Jerry! Show me the money! Jerry, you better yell! Show me the money! Show me the money! You love this black man!
We welcome you to another episode of College Sports Follow the Money. Along with Dr. Jon Heidtke, along with Dr. Bowen Loftin, I am Dr. Andrew Monaco. I've just made us all doctors. If you are of a certain age, you know if I say spanning the globe to bring you a constant variety of sports, that would be ABC's Wide World of Sports. But we have spanned the globe from the 49th states of Alaska. Dr. Bowen Loftin joins. He doesn't even get a vacation from Follow the Money in our podcast. Howdy, Doctor.
Good morning, gentlemen. It's morning for me still. It's afternoon for you right now. We're 3 hours behind you in Central Time Zone anyway. And it's about 55 degrees outside right now, my window here, as the weak sunlight bathes my face and gives you my glow. But I do
Thanks
apologize.
for bragging about that temperature. I don't think it's been 55 in like weeks.
I apologize to both of you. This is maybe my first episode with no bow tie. I failed to pack one. I packed one last year when I was in Dutch Harbor, in the Aleutian Islands, doing the broadcast or podcast, and now I'm not having one today, so I apologize for that. I am wearing a shirt, though, you might find interesting.
Love it.
My sweatshirt here to keep me warm during this very cool day here in Alaska, while my wife and grandchildren and daughter go off horseback riding soon.
He's just rubbing it in, John, isn't he?
Well,
he's just rubbing it in.
Yeah, I was going to say, and it's our first day over 100, I think. So we've been close, but broke it down today. And I was going to say, for those other viewers who are of the ABC Wide World of Sports vintage, I think maybe Dr. Bowen's bow tie may become the latest version of Wally Pitt, because he looks pretty hip there without it.
Yes, I look relaxed.
We know how far and wide the Aggie family is. Does that sweatshirt get some comments, and do you get some howdies?
I do. In fact, just yesterday, I was at an event involving just a kind of a small event involving my grandchildren at a movie house, basically. And as I was walking out, I got a howdy from someone who was walking out as an Aggie there. I sat next to a gentleman on the plane from Houston to Anchorage that has two children, one of who's already graduated, one of whom's a fish camp counselor right now at A&M. So again, it's hard not to be in a place where they're Aggies, gentlemen.
That's fantastic. Let's get started with our episode, shall we? And everything that we talk about, you follow the money, you can follow it all the way to the White House. Dr. Loftin, President Trump delivered an executive order. And I guess if we always knew that Congress may have a say when it came to NIL and it came to all that was going on in college athletics, all the way to the White House last week for President Trump.
Well, the president has issued an executive order, which I don't think will have much impact. People already argue over its ability to do anything real. But what he tried to do in the order he signed was to kind of roll back things to where they used to be in many respects. What I think is more important right now is a thing called the SCORES Act, SCORES Act, which is before Congress. It's already gone through one or two of the committees in the House. Most people believe it'll end up passing. It has two Democratic co-sponsors, Maybe the only two Democrats will vote for it, but there are two people who are actually supporting it right now. And what it does is several things. It basically says, NCAA, you are now going to be under antitrust, exempted. So it rolls back. It gives us what MLB's had for a long time in college sports. It gives us the ability to operate without antitrust laws affecting the outcomes. That's been the basis for most of the decisions made so far against the NCAA. It's been antitrust, and that will go away. It does a number of things in terms of providing support and non-support. It says athletes are not employees. So that's the other big thing it does. It basically says, as opposed to some individuals' desire, that a athlete's not an employee of a university, even though they're being paid by the university. It does not really roll back anything about the decisions made to date financially. It does not do anything about NIL financially. It allows it to continue. But there'll be regulations in play that will allow things to happen. It really, I think, has a big impact on potentially the Power Four, and not clear how much it will have on the other conferences at all. But certainly the Power Four, where the big money is, will be affected by that. This is the first time I've thought that there's going to be a reality in terms of a legislative action by the Congress to get rid of all state NIL laws. It basically bans all NIL laws at the state level and supplants it with this federal law. And it does provide, by most people's measure, a reasonable framework to work in. The opposition to the law is primarily, it ought to call athletes employees. That's the main opposition, I think, right now that I hear about in play. And some say it doesn't go far enough in terms of protecting athletes going forward. So I don't know the outcome necessarily, but this may be the best shot we have had anyway for quite some time, federal legislation. John, what are you hearing about this right now? You're not ears to the ground, I know.
I wish I was telling you I was following as closely as you, but I probably haven't. I'm still more focused on, as you look at these things get done, what are going to be the loopholes that continue to find their way through, and how do you tie those up? And so I think that's something that you can't make a perfect law, and so how do you avoid people from exploiting some of the areas where they some people can exploit it. So. But I do think, again, it's a step in the right direction. I think the biggest issue there is if they can find a way, you're starting to see it's almost a pretty evenly divide on the players. All right, we're going to have to collect a bargain. We're not. Are we going to get the antitrust there? So I think that's interesting. And I think that potentially, if they could get that piece figured out, that would potentially eliminate more lawsuits that could come down the pike in terms of eliminating opportunities for student athletes to be compensated. So I think I haven't seen that specifically spelled out in the SCORE Act or how they're going to do that. But like anything else, it's the devil's always in the detail. But I think those are going to be some points they're going to have to at least address in this process. And to your point, where does Title IX fit in all this too? So I think there's still I think, again, we're on the right path, but we're certainly not. We're probably nowhere near the goal line on this yet.
Yeah, interestingly enough, the verbiage around the president's executive order was largely directed at the court, saying, let's get away from this litigation by decades that's been going on. He said, right now we have athletes that are actually still litigating long past their athletic time frame anyway. That I think that the major thing about the executive order was the verbiage about saying that let's get away from this litigation to drive everything. It's taken decades to date to get this done. As far as we are right now, much is still in front of us. Many athletes who played 15 years ago are being involved in litigation still. So President Trump's office was basically saying, let's get away from this litigation approach to solving our problems here and do it by executive order in his case, or do it by legislation in the case of the SCORES Act. And that's a right thing to do. I think getting away from litigation will be important here. It just ties things up. Right now, litigation against the House settlement is in play. And so far, it's stopped all of the payments to past players. It has not affected the 1-2 current players, but that's only a matter of time, I think, before that's shut down as well, potentially. So I believe we have a need to get a law in place that would stop, hopefully, for most situations, the litigation has been the dominant player for well over 15 years now.
What's interesting is today it comes down with the CSC, the College Sports Commission, and their CEO, Brian Seeley. And I'll read you his quote. He said, "The College Sports Commission will enforce the settlement as written. Pay for play will not be permitted. And every NIL deal done with a student athlete must be a legitimate NIL deal, not pay for play in disguise." Now, we knew when the House settlement came down and Judge Wilkins said what she said in her decision, we knew some of this was going to shake out. Now this is starting to shake out. And once again, you have athletic directors who have to anticipate. We've talked about this before because things can change from yesterday to today with that. But now that we know the parameters, we know what the guardrails are, we can move. But no more can you just say this, that pay for play is now out. To John's point, though, loopholes, because everybody looks for loopholes, but at least now we've got a little bit of a path that we can travel for everybody to go forward, and we've stopped waiting, so to speak.
Well, I hope that's the case, Andrew. I think right now the commission you cited here came out and said early on that we're going to prohibit any kind of NIL deals coming from a thing like a collective where there's no business purpose other than transferring money from one person to another. Well, the House lawyers got together with NCAA people and decided, no, we don't like this one bit. So they try to get that shoved aside to allow collectives, as we now know them, to continue to do their job of transferring money from a donor to an athlete, even though one could question what the business purpose of that might be. So I think there's still a lot of iffiness right here about how the CSC, or what's it called, the go part of it anyway.
NIL Go. Yeah, where all the deals go through.
There. I'm not sure how it's going to function yet. One marker I have is one of our donor community groups here at Texas A&M has put pause a bit onto having its donor support going to athletes pending clarification by NIL Go. They've actually submitted sample kinds of contracts to them, asking for them to give an opinion about that, where these appearance contracts are legitimate because of this initial finding or statement by the commission. But now the House settlement lawyers seem to have jumped over that and said, we don't like this situation. We've got to go back to a situation where we don't have any kind of limitation on what kind of group can provide NIL payments. I don't know how quickly that's going to be resolved totally, but right now it seems to be in the House settlements lawyers' hands, shall we say.
John, we learned earlier today that if it gets rejected, you can appeal. It can go to arbitration or then down the line. And that's the NIL Go, that fair market value for that. I thought that was fascinating. Now, my understanding with NIL Go, a lot of them are going through. Not all of them. A lot of them are going through. So that is working. But I was interested in learning that, okay, if that deal is turned down, what's next? And you can appeal. You can go to arbitration. And then I guess the final result would be you could, go to trial. You could sue, and do that, go to litigation, if you will. But I thought that was fascinating learning about that this morning.
What's clear, Andrew, is that right now, a lot of electives, a lot of athletic departments have gone ahead and stacked their money into the last year. I mean, the huge increase of payments for NIL up till July 1, when we had the effective date for the commission coming on play, people were worried about how this might stop things. And so consequently, we've had a real spike in NIL payments. A&M, our school here, A&M, had more than a doubling of its NIL payments from one year to the next, just because they wanted to get it in under the wire.
Yeah. Once again, in anticipation of what might happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let me turn to conferences once again, because I thought there were two stories that came out about conferences. Memphis trying to buy their way into the Big 12. And if I oversimplified that, I apologize. And once again, North Carolina and Clemson, we thought the ACC was settled along the lines of it may not be equal distribution of money, but there's rumbles of them going to the SEC. But Memphis tried to buy its way into the Big 12. Am I oversimplifying that, or is that what the Tigers tried to do?
Essentially, they promised $200 million of sponsorship payments to the Big 12 in return for membership, as I understand it. That I think is interesting that it was rejected without any real explanation. Now, is that reflecting on Memphis's, inability to compete within that particular conference framework, or some other reason? Maybe John's heard more about this than I've heard.
Well, I mean, the Big 12 is pretty unwieldy at where they are now. What, 18 schools, if my math is correct? So trying to just add one probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And if this was similar to what Memphis did a while back when conference realignment was, they did a really good job of rustling up local business leaders in the Memphis market to try to help support that organization. I believe FedEx is located there, and I believe their chairman at one point was going to be the money behind some whatever this was. If you let us in, this will be the honorarium that we would pay to the conference, or a sponsorship, for the next 5 years at $200,000 or whatever that looked like, to be to help Memphis get in. That's not unlike what SMU did, to get into the giving up their TV rights for the ACC. So I applaud them on their creativity. I just think the timing was not great for them to want to do that, and I think maybe Memphis was playing the card that, well, if you don't take us Big 12, we're going to go to the Pac-12, and who knows what that's going to do at some point in time if there are more schools get involved with that. So that's sort of what I heard, but again, that was more on the periphery than anything else. But I just think, again, from a Big 12 standpoint, adding one school probably didn't make a lot of sense, which wasn't really going to move the needle. And was that money really that valuable to them at the end of the day? And, based on their decision, or their quick decision, it probably wasn't.
John, is it a group of 6 school wanting to get into a Power 4 conference? That simple. The Pac-12 is not that right now. Sorry, it's just not. And they toyed with Memphis, with Tulane, other schools that you brought out. But it seemed like Memphis wants to have a seat at the table, like SMU doing what it did. Okay, we'll do this because we're in the ACC. That was my first thought. Memphis wants to make sure it's part of a Power 4 conference. Yeah,
and I think they're trying to, if they can get into that spot again, at the next time musical chairs games get played, will that help them? Will they be able to compete? Will they have enhanced their brand? Will they have enhanced their athletic programs to merit that consideration from what that process looks like? And I think we've all talked about brands over the pretty heavily over this process. Is their brand going to be in that top 60 that people are going to be looking at? That's going to make sense for them to be one of the lower level tiers in one of the larger conferences.
Interesting, because when they were talking Pac-12, it wasn't going to be for all sports. There was thoughts of dividing it and maybe basketball going to the Big East. Now you're divided between conferences for your sports. I don't think this will necessarily, though, and I'm interested in your thought, I don't think it necessarily stops other schools from trying something like that. I mean, look, the Big 12 looked into private equity. It looked into having a sponsorship of their conference in general. I'm not so sure this is something that may not be tried by another school just because it didn't work for Memphis. Maybe it will work for another school, or maybe maybe there's going to be an enticement or something like this to attract a school into a P4 conference.
Yeah, no, I think, again, those ancillary revenue streams, however they may come, are going to be valuable. And I think, again, the majority of those ancillary revenue streams for those types of schools are going to probably be driven by, a donor who has, a strong passion for his or her school.
In the Atlantic Coast Conference, we heard rumblings now of North Carolina and Clemson possibly going to the SEC. Again, there's always been a fractured at best. When Florida State sued the conference, Clemson was a part of it. I do know this, that in the past, North Carolina is always one of those schools that are coveted, not just by the SEC, but by the Big Ten. And I will always add this when we talk about the Big Ten. You must be AAU accredited or you're not going to get in to the Big Ten. Now, will they relax that? I don't know. But just when you thought the ACC had put enough tape on this to keep all their members together, almost like the last thing the conference needed was to have two of their best known schools be thinking about going to the Southeastern Conference.
Well, you're right, Andrew. I don't understand it exactly. We all thought it was put to bed, as you said. We thought it was put to bed because of some concessions made by the ACC leadership to keep these schools happy. UNC wasn't really part of the conversation. It was more Florida State and Clemson at that particular point. And I thought it was going to be peace for a while. But now the rumors have come right back at us again. There's lots of reporting from Carolina papers and such and other news media there about what UNC is talking about doing. UNC is a prize in a way. I saw one comment from an individual who wrote back into the athletic column that they were discussing this in and saying, if they come into the SEC, it will lower the value of the conference. And so I think that's a little bit of exaggeration there. They certainly have a reputation of being a decent basketball school over time. They competed well in that particular regard. Football, you could argue. I mean, Mac tried to make something happen there, did he not, for a time? But that's not really been persistent exactly. And they moved on a bit from that. But UNC
Bill
clearly
Belichick,
is,
right?
is a prize.
They didn't fool around in football.
Well, it's a prize for two reasons. It's a prize because it is a high quality school. As you mentioned, AAU, they are an AAU school. Clemson is not. Okay. And so that's one of the issues right there. They have some value in that regard from academic perspectives. At the same time, they don't have a really long resume of athletic prowess except in the area of basketball. You can talk about lacrosse. You can talk about a few things like that, non-revenue sports, but that they've done well at. But it's not clear what's driving this. If it's just people who are angry and really wanting to be somewhere else, or is it really a strategy being pursued by the school itself that's driving this particular rumor set? Clemson clearly would love to be able to be in a different league. That's been a long time situation there. I'm surprised Florida State didn't come out of the conversation as well, but they haven't in this particular situation.
John, we talk brands a lot. So North Carolina is a brand. Does the Jumpman brand in Nike also help them, or does it not affect it at all?
I don't think it doesn't hurt. Is that going to be the deal breaker? Probably not. But I do think that, all things being equal, having Jordan and that brand and Nike part of that process pouring into them, it is a benefit. Is it a big enough benefit to get someone to make that their primary reason to make that decision? Doubtful, but it's certainly it's a check on the box for to take North Carolina in that situation. And I think, again, we talk about that situation. It's still going to be a powder keg. All those schools are going to be trying to play. I think Florida State was first up. They got Clemson involved. Now Clemson, is doing their part. Now North Carolina, Virginia, you've heard their name in this process. It's not going to stop until, the next round of those things happen. And I think all of those schools, if you put truth serum to them, they're all going to say we would be better off in the Big Ten or the SEC than where we are today. And what do we do to continue to best position ourselves for if and when that happens?
Talking season for each of the conferences as they have their media days to kick off college football season. Players at Texas A&M checked in on Tuesday, and the first practice was on Wednesday. Today, on this Thursday, as we tape this, is practice number 2. But one thing that comes out, they seem to all react to one another. Dr. Loftin, the Big Ten and the college football playoff, that was a big part of the Big Ten meetings as they were in their talking season. You're going to hear a lot of 5 plus 11 moving forward, this and that number of teams. But right now, Big Ten could put everything in chaos, couldn't it?
Well, it could. I'm interested in the fact that they're by themselves. I mean, it's clear that the commissioner of the Big Ten has strong support from his coaches and ADs. No doubt about that. What I don't see is anybody else jumping on that bandwagon of the automatic qualifiers of 4 for them and 4 for the SEC, a couple for the ACC and Big 12, et cetera. He came out in his media days with a lot of data. If you listen to that at all, you heard lots of numbers being spread out there. They looked at many years back, if they had their proposed model in place for this time period, what would it look like? And they were showing that they were at the top of the heap, barely, the SEC was right behind them, and the others were falling down the way. They were trying to justify that their model is going to be reality. Their model is what it's been like, really, in terms of participation in the CFP since its beginning. And so expanding to 16 teams, adopting the model of the Big Ten seems to be arguably their justification is arguably that they're going to have no real difference in terms of how things come out. You know, you can always make numbers to say what you want them to say, and I get that. What I find interesting is that there's been no latching onto this by the SEC, and active opposition by the ACC and the Big 12. So even though the SEC and the Big Ten will be the drivers of the CFP decision making, presumably, I don't know that others are going to be going along with that. And Sankey, at least, has been quite unwilling to adopt the model proposed by his counter commissioner over in the Big Ten. And I don't know how it's going to happen without the SEC buying in as well. What do you think, John?
Well, I have a question on this. And what I read and saw on the Big 12 or the Big 10 opposition was, are they going to have playing games at the end of the year to secure those 4 spots? Did I read that right?
That was one thing that they absolutely talked about, John. Yes.
Right.
Almost like the playoffs start earlier in the Big Ten.
So, so if the Big Ten, then I think what that's also going to do is going to enhance their media revenue opportunities.
Exactly. That's the whole point. Yeah.
So, to me, if they're going to do that and they're going to, put those games on there, you play in. And so that's going to be, as a football guy and you've seen enough playoffs there, I mean, to me, that's got some appeal to me that you're going to make sure your teams are playing each other. You're not going to have Ohio State miss Michigan through this process to get into the tournament, at least in the regular season again. And then they, who knows if they meet in the playoffs. But to me, I was intrigued by that, but I probably haven't done a deep enough dive. But if I'm Fox and NBC, I'm probably, cheering these guys on the sidelines, because that's going to increase my inventory of games. And again, we talk about those games with big brands that are going to drive big eyeballs leading to that time of the season. Those are going to be 10, 15 million plus eyeballs. And that's music. And we'll talk about this a little bit later from an advertising perspective. But I see that, and maybe the SEC doesn't want to do that, or they would be forced to have playing games too. I don't know how that would work, but.
Well, the play-in clearly is helping right now on the revenue side of the equation. The other big argument is 9 versus 8. I mean, is the 9-game conference schedule mitigating against this or helping it? That's arguably either way. You can go either way there. And will the SEC come along and move into a 9-game conference schedule? But the play-ins are huge in terms of the revenues. John, you're exactly right on. These play-in games could bring a lot more revenue into the school. ESPN clearly says that. If you look at the media, everybody says ESPN owns Big Ten. Is that a proper perception there, John?
No, they don't. I mean, Fox owns the Big Ten. And if these are Big Ten play-in games and they're not part of the CFP, then I think that's going to create even more value to, their television partners to make this thing, more attractive for them. So I didn't see anybody really talking about how that would work, but I kept seeing that, but nobody really jumped on that as saying, hey, and if they're going to have that tournament, I could see where Petitti's saying, all right, we're going to have this tournament. We deserve those 4 spots so that, whoever wins 6 versus 4 is going to get in.
I just find it interesting that if your games are on Fox.
And if somebody upsets 6 versus 4 and they don't make whatever the top something is, they shouldn't be penalized for not getting in. So I think that's why they wanted to get the 4 automatic qualifiers, to make sure that an upset didn't knock somebody out.
I gotcha. Yeah, I see that exactly. So that if that upstart that comes in doesn't see, to me, then you're not upsetting the Ohio States and the Michigans.
Yeah,
I'm not.
They're going to be in regardless.
If you have the Big Ten and your games are on Fox, NBC, CBS, and now you have a play-in. That's 3 networks that might bid. In the SEC, you only have 1. You're only dealing with ESPN. Why would they give you more money?
They would.
I mean, like, you have 3 that are going to be bidding for those play-in games. I know there's a value to it for ESPN. I get it. Will you get all of that from them, or you know what I mean? And to Dr. Loftin's part, you have to not only get to decide on 9 in the SEC. But are we then going to move forward to the unofficial 10th conference game of SEC playing the Big Ten every year? And this is what the coaches are talking about. Is 9 worth it? to the CFP. If I play a 9th SEC game, my strength of schedule is better than anybody else's, but we're getting penalized because the committee is going by record. But strength of schedule, so why play 9? Let's play 8. I need to have a better record if I'm going to beat out an SEC school is going to have a stronger strength of schedule than Indiana. Sorry. And I know they're in the Big Ten. That's how it is. There's a lot of things that have to be figured. But, John, my first thing was you've got 3 networks competing for the play-in. It's an absolute money generator.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it gets, again, it makes the reason to ask for the 4 automatic qualifiers palatable, because you're saying, like, we're going to do our own tournament, and because of that, we should get 4 teams in. And again, from a business perspective or a fan perspective, it's hard to argue against that. I think, again, by having 9 games, you're playing more of your conference opponents anyway. So there's a better, you have a better idea who's good and who's not. If you had a scenario where Georgia, Texas, and Alabama all finished 1, 2, 3, but nobody played each other during the year, that would be a real hard, try to sell. And so I think, again, it would put the SEC in a position of having to, to defend that situation. And I think, again, you've heard even Bavacqua and the guys at Notre Dame are saying we got to do better games. We need to make sure that when we play, that fans are going to want to come to our games. Again, having 3 games against, no offense to Utah State, UTSA, or Samford, out of your 7, almost half the schedule is those. How do you still get people to come in there and put a $7-8 million payday against your home games? So all of these things, I think, are all conspiring together to try to, to create as close to an apples to apples type of scenario that the committee could be. Again, we all 3 here consider to be on the committee, and we all could be right, we all could be wrong. All right. So that's the issue. So, but if you played it out on the field and you got that person and they beat such and such for that 8th spot, it's hard to argue that at that point. You earned your way.
But if the Big Ten wins this sort of model discussion right now, and we adopt their model for the CFP, doesn't that eliminate the committee? Basically, they don't have much of a role to play anymore in terms
I
of
think
their
they're
rankings.
trying to, because even though the Big Ten has benefited, I think they're trying to.
But you still have to seed. You have to, there's some things in there. But you're right. I think they're trying to take as much of the, taking the committee's deal of saying I'm in or I'm out of their hands. Because again, you hate to leave it up to human judgment at that. Because again, we could all be right, we all could be wrong. I mean, it's hard to determine that. But this is, again, you've earned it on the field by if you do this. So I do think, again, there is some merit to that. And again, in this day and age, your quarterback gets hurt before the season starts. If it was Florida last year and DJ Lagway was playing great at the end of the year, could Florida have made some noise in that process? Maybe. So again, I see the merits to it, but I think more of it's, as you dig a little bit deeper, and we talk about the name of our show, there's probably a little bit more money involved in that when it comes for those schools playing each other, and that would continue to separate the Big Ten payday from the SEC.
Isn't that what conference championships were, though? A play-in game? And Florida State was out 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Back to your point, you're leaving it up to a committee. And Dr. Loftin, you're saying, okay, they're going to play in. Yeah. They get in because they did it. That's why I said you want to chew that committee out, take all that guesswork and all the, as John said, the human factor out.
The play-ins eliminate that completely from the Big Ten. And they're going to play within their own framework and figure out who's going to go to the CFP. Forget the committee's input here completely.
I can't help but think down the line, though, this is the template for the breakaway schools. Yeah. That this is what we're going to do in the future, whatever it's going to be named. Again, are we going to start with this and then move that when we break away from all the others? And again, however many schools that is, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to set up. And maybe we have that play in for that ultimate championship there. But John, to your point, yeah, there's money to be made here, just like there's money to be made for a 9th SEC game.
And just to say, I may have my numbers wrong, but 2 NFL games that Netflix bought, they paid over $100 million for those. So think about that, real quick in the process. I mean, these aren't going to be NFL caliber games, but they're certainly going to be worth $50 million.
And John,
if that was the going rate for those games,
if ESPN is giving Turner games in the playoff, might Turner get SEC play?
What ESPN could do is agree to pay more money and then sub-license those games. They could do that.
Yeah. I found this interesting talking to one of the SEC coaches who was referring to an SEC AD not the same school, but they were talking about 8 versus 9. And one of the concerns was we were talking about the strength of schedule. And the AD was saying, look, if we add that 9th game, here's how much money we can get for the additional games from TV. What the coach said, are you also taking into effect that 9th SEC game that if I, as head coach, do not win, now you're firing me and you've got to pay me? Does that nullify the money that you're getting from ES? It's fascinating when ADs, presidents, Dr. Loftin, you can speak to this, and coaches all talk about this. And I had not thought about that. Like, that's great. We're going to get an extra $10 million. But what's the buyout if you have to change your college coach who's not meeting your level? Like, again, I had not thought about that, but that's another layer into adding an additional game. Will a coach be protected? What if you're adding that Big Ten matchup for the SEC where now you're playing Ohio State or Michigan? Look, you could get Purdue and you could get somebody else, but like everybody kind of wants to protect what they need to protect.
One could argue, Andrew, that $10 million only covers 1 year of a certain buyout. I could argue
absolutely.
So,
you're absolutely right.
You're right. I mean, I think that the coaches are obviously going to be against an expansion. How the Big Ten, got that buy-in, you can argue that all day too. But I think there's going to be resistance there. I think the ADs and the presidents and chancellors are going to be the ones coming in and saying, we're making this decision for one reason. We're going to follow the money.
And I think the other thing about this, to your point, Andrew, is that I think you're going to see, it's hard to take one of those issues and separate and put a spotlight on it and say what it means about that coach and getting fired or whatever that may be. I think what you're going to see is a reset in your coach's contracts to realize no one's going to go 12-0 anymore unless you are. I mean, that's going to take a Herculean feat, of epic proportions. But if you've got these deals done right and your coaches are incentive based, you're not going to hopefully have that much of a buyout issue there, from that process, and so I think that's going to be kind of part and parcel of that process too, that if you lower those buyouts, I don't think anybody's going to do a buyout like that going forward. I don't see that happening to get something like what we saw here, at A&M when we hired Jimbo. So I think those are going to go away. I think the industry's gotten smarter to that. And so I don't think you're going to see those. So you're still going to have buyouts, but it's not going to be that level. It may be a $5 million buyout or something like that, which again could easily be covered versus, and again, there'll be outliers out there. Something happens, you do something stupid, you get that. But I think that those would be the outliers or the exceptions rather than the rules.
I wonder if, and this is Andrew thinking out loud, I wonder if the SEC resistance to 9 games was from the old, if you have to slug your way through the SEC West in the old, when you had divisions, then you had 2 other games from the East, and depending on who you got, where the Big Ten was not as deep as the SEC. And I wonder if that's why it was easier to get that 9th game, that 9th conference game.
You're right.
As opposed to the SEC. Again, I'm just, now there may be some years that you've got the absolute gauntlets in the Big Ten. You just don't hear about that as much as the SEC. But again, what's our title? Follow the money. I would put the money on a 9th SEC game because, and to John, your point, a full stadium as well. And at Texas A&M, if you have 97,000 season tickets sold, we're bringing in Ohio State. And look, what's been the problem? Why hasn't A&M played some of those Big Ten schools in September? They're not coming here in September.
Yeah.
Notre Dame did in August, which was surprising. Michigan won't. Ohio State won't. Penn State won't. That might take that excuse away. And now you have an absolute glamour non-conference game. John, back to that becomes attractive to someone. Televise, stream, something. When you have that, you have a pretty special Saturday in college football.
Who would ever carry that game, streamer or broadcaster, it's going to do a significant amount of eyeballs. All right. And again, as a network or a streaming company out there, those are the games. Again, Netflix doesn't want to buy Purdue and Vanderbilt. Right. They want to buy Penn State and A&M. So those are, and I think, again, you market right. And Penn State, Vanderbilt, or Purdue, Vanderbilt ends up on the SEC network. And, Penn State A&M is going to end up on prime time on one of the big boys.
Yeah. John, one thing that is coming out recently, ESPN and NFL Network. We saw what has happened with the NBA and their new deal, but ESPN actually and NFL, like ESPN being part of the NFL Network, taking that over. Does that affect college sports at all?
Probably all that would impact college sports would be how much money does ESPN have to pay for what they want. They're probably pretty happy with the SEC. They've got their SEC deal done for the considerable future. So I don't think it has a direct impact, maybe an indirect impact at the end of the day. But I think if I was ESPN and now I'm launching my own streaming service, having out all that IP content from NFL films, and you can't put a value on all that, what that's going to mean to them. And if you're a partner with the NFL, probably not going to lose your TV rights, anytime soon, too, when the next round of negotiations up. So it certainly probably gives them insurance that they will always be part of, the NFL conversation going forward.
But guys, this deal is interesting because the ESPN people are going to give part ownership to the NFL if this model is pursued. So they'll get maybe 10% of the ESPN worth, shall we say, in stock and in control. Is that possible with a college model? Is it possible that ESPN could say to a Ohio State or a Texas A&M or any other really name brand school, okay, we're going to give you a piece of the action. We're going to let you get equity in our company as part of your deal. That's what I'm seeing here as unlikely, but still a possibility. If you really look at this in the extreme case here, because the NFL is going to really own a chunk of ESPN if this deal is consummated. And is it possible for that to be translated into a college model?
I think it's hard in the college model. You have to go any further than the Longhorn Network. So I mean that was they basically paid him way more than they were worth, so they could have that relationship with them and so see where they could take that. So based on that track record, I don't think you're going to see those. I think it's harder for colleges to be or an SEC to have an equity piece in college athletics. That's why I don't think you've seen any of these deals done, because there's really no way to say what's a college institution worth. Maybe someday they'll figure that out, there's probably metrics that would allow you to come up with a number. You've seen, I think, people out there try to take a stab at it, with all these different, how many alumni do you have? What's your TV ratings? Yada, yada, yada. How many t-shirts do you sell? And the big brands always, whenever you do whatever those exercises, it's always Ohio State, Texas are usually 1 and 2 in those types of things. So I think in this particular situation, it's the NFL, it's good for them too, because now they've got another revenue stream that they're trying to come in. And they're betting on ESPN being one of the guys that stayed through this process. So they have a long history to work with each other. And in this particular area, I think it binds them together even more, that whatever happens in the industry and what other disruptive platforms come out, those two will probably be partners in some sense of semblance, however that turns out. Who would have 10 years ago said we're going to have Christmas days on Netflix, and raise their hands? Probably no one. People are going to say, what is Netflix? Okay, even back then, 10 years ago. So again, the world's changing, and I think this is kind of an insurance policy for both sides to invest in each other and know that they sleep a little bit easier at night, that they're going to be partners, whatever the world looks like going forward.
When you go back to when ESPN got back into Monday Night Football and devoted their entire Monday lineup of ESPN to the NFL and to see where it did, that payoff was worth it, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it was attractive to the NFL. Then the NFL got 8 games on ABC. Like, ABC was the forgotten network. And I never, I've preached about this before, over the air always. The thing that got me was, you would think the owners would have gone to ESPN and said, give us more money if you're putting games on ABC. Now, I know why they did it, because of COVID, right? I get that. But if I'm CBS and NBC and I paid this and I see ESPN paying whatever for this and then putting games on ABC, wait a second. How come they didn't have to pay more? But going back to what they did originally, making Monday just an NFL day on ESPN, and now to be in that partnership, it ends up looking brilliant. And John, to me, what you just said, a hedge about what's to come. You've got so much security right there for the network and for
And
Not that the NFL needs it, but they have it.
they have it. And will ESPN overpay for the network? Yes. I mean, most, what they're paying for it. But to your point, that hedge is probably long term is going to be very valuable to them to keep that enterprise still churning along at a healthy profit because they're a publicly held company. And live sports is going to continue to drive that process. I was talking with Andrew about this morning, and this is semi-related to this process. And just again, to kind of share with you about the importance of live sports as we continue to move forward. All right. There used to be a thing in the television world called upfronts. And what an upfront was all the networks got to New York where all the advertising agencies were, and they do dog and pony showing what great shows we are. If you go back 40 years ago, we've got Happy Days, we've got Laverne and Shirley. They would sell these shows, and advertisers would say, "We like it. We're gonna buy advertising now and buy our basically 12 months out of the year upfront." Hence the name upfront. And so roughly during those deals, 80-90% of the inventory would get sold. Okay. As the upfronts now from the broadcast have become, there's no more new network entertainment programming out there. The upfronts have changed to be promoting more of what are my sports properties. Netflix and Amazon actually were at the upfronts this year talking about their NFL coverage, their F1 coverage, etc. And to give you an example, I just read a report that ESPN Disney closed their upfront, basically $4 billion they sold in upfront. It was basically all sports, is what they said. So it was they were promoting all their sports property out there. Of that upfront, okay, which is a big number for them. Guess how much revenue was attributable to the digital offerings? This is Disney Plus, so ESPN Plus, when these games are being streamed, etc. What do you think was the percentage of that upfront was going to be going to digital this year?
Dr. Loftin, I know the answer, so I'm not.
Well, I'm guessing 50%.
Let me tell you, 3 years ago, it was in the single digits.
That's 50%. Okay, it's going to be a big number.
Well, 30%, roughly 30 to 40% of this is digital right
I'm
now.
off
Okay, so think.
I'm looking ahead to a year.
In 3 years, what that money's going to, so that streaming now for all of these networks, you see ESPN going toward it. All of that's important now because that's where all the eyeballs are going. And now the advertising dollars are starting to follow it there. So if you're a content guy, you've got to figure out, okay, what does my streaming service looks like? And creating these types of games, playing games or challenges, majority of these, guess where they're going to end up, gentlemen? Streaming.
Yeah.
Because it's new content you can pull out of your agreement and monetize it better than just, in keeping it with your current TV partner.
It's purely an aging thing, guys. You're seeing the generation you're from, John, not so much you, Andrew. As we age, we're going to continue to stay with our old media sources if we can. And I haven't done that necessarily, but many people have. I know a lot of friends of mine, my age, just won't give up what they've been using for years as their source of sports. But the new generation, the 35-year-olds and even down, certainly don't worry about that anymore. They're strictly streaming based and maybe even platform based to a phone or something like that.
I think there is becoming a fatigue, though, to so many. I think we've got to be careful. Like, I think they will jump to some, but I think there's almost a fatigue of it's so fractured. That's why I'm intrigued by ESPN's standalone. Like, will that, again, if you just want local channels, how do you do that in the streaming world? Or if you just want sports with the cost? Like, I think you have to be really careful that we broke up cable. And now with all these streaming, we're getting back to cable. It's just being, I think you have to be careful where John, but the targeting and the data is what always intrigues me that you talk about, John, when it comes to that.
The data that you get from streaming, being able to, use those points to, to cross market, there's a big thing about data now is it's so important to everybody. So if you look at data, first you want to capture it. So how do I capture all that data? A variety of different ways. Streaming, looking at people's use of credit cards, all of the viewing habits, all these things. There's hundreds and hundreds of data points out there. So how do you get these data points? Then you get those data points. Now, how do you convert them into meaningful visualization that you can use, to take that data and go to the marketplace and either use that to generate sponsorships or, more importantly, generate revenue from the individual, potential customer, which then leads you to that personalization of that process. Okay. So, when Andrew Monaco, they know what you're watching and they can send you, and I'm going to pay $100 for this, but instead of me sitting at Netflix on like what to watch, they're going to know exactly they're going to feed me content that I will, and it may be from other even entities too at the end of the day, but they'll be able to kind of figure what that out is. And it's that bundling back. to go back to your point here, and that's going to come, and that's where I think, again, the real monetization process takes a hold, because you can probably have a dollar figure for every customer that you have at that pace and what they're spending. It can get that granular when you have that much data and you know who all your customers are. So the other thing about this was, I was just in a meeting in New York City last week with Charter Cable. These are the guys that they're called Spectrum. They're in San Antonio, Dallas, everywhere in Texas, probably, but Houston. All right. So they carry the Ranger Sports Network. We were talking about, what are we seeing? And again, if you looked at Charter, they were just telling us they were releasing their quarterly numbers. And if you'd watched Charter, DirecTV, any of these cable companies for the past 5-6 years, they're losing 500,000 subs a quarter. They've gone from 100 million, 10 years ago down to like 35 or 40 million now. So in Charter's deal, year over year, they lost 400,000 customers last, whatever the year-to-year number was. This report, they've lost only 80,000 people. All right. And part of the reason was now their negotiations with the Disneys, with the Paramounts, with the Peacocks, they're getting the ability to take their apps and put it on a tier on their cable network. So now, because they've marketed that and they've taken that and they've got cell phone and they've got broadband now, they've kind of gone back to a bundled approach. And now with these distribution deals, they're getting to put those streaming services as an app on a tier on the process. And they think that's going to continue to maybe slow down because nobody's figured out the bundling issue yet. Mm-hmm. And so in their particular model, they says, look, if we can slow down that erosion, we may not grow subs, on the digital, on the linear world, but if they can stop that erosion, or it's that churn is that small, that's going to be a win for them. And fans are going to potentially go there and say, hey, this could be where I get my bundle. I can go to Charter and have my navigation to take me everywhere I want to go and watch all this content, because there's still value to the bundle out there. And again, at least in the sports property worlds, we haven't figured that out yet. And I think Charter's trying to at least put a step out there, or plant a flag and say, hey guys, you can still get your phone, you can get your broadband through. Most of you are my broadband customers. I can sell you cell service too if you like it. Oh, by the way, from a video perspective, now look at all the apps I've got. And their pitch is they basically have $100 worth of apps that they're going to say, hey guys, buy my $100 service and get $100 worth of apps, which is a pretty compelling marketing deal for people who are tired of paying all of for all these different apps. They may not watch all the different content on it, and then
they're not missing out any longer.
Yeah,
they've got that. They don't have the fatigue because they can now. I don't have to choose. I've got it in there.
Yeah, it's here.
John, does it also keep them from, if you want Fox, you also have to have Fox News, FS1. I just want over-the-air Fox. I don't care about FS1, FS2, this and that. Does that help there? And does it make it a little cheaper for the Charters of the world?
Well, what you're seeing too now is these guys, what they're calling skinny bundles. Instead of giving you 700 channels or 1,000 channels out there, they're allowing you to sort of pick. And again, there's a culling of the herd of some of those channels now that have found all their content maybe make more sense in a streaming environment. All right. Mm-hmm. Any entertainment product you can stream, fast channel, etc. So those networks aren't quite as valuable anymore. But if you have a news component or a live sports component, there's a good chance they're going to keep those in those lineups, and that becomes part of that skinnier bundle that you're paying for.
Gotcha.
There are two tuners, guys. AI will do the job. AI is going to be, I think, the driver of being able to customize at the individual level exactly what a person prefers to see based on the data they've acquired. So the data is the key, as you said, John. Data is the key. But AI will let you analyze that data at the finest grain you want and be able to provide Andrew Monaco and Jon Heidtke with their specific uniquenesses of what they want to be able to see. That won't happen tomorrow. But
so the three of us could all watch the same thing,
yes.
But the data they get, it's not a general algorithm any longer, right?
No,
it's more personalized to you, to me, and to John. Yeah. Is that what you're saying?
Very specific data is out there.
Now what happens?
AI's success today is coming from that one source, is the ability to get lots and lots of data and be able to make sense of it.
No. And then it knows what you want to watch. It serves it up for you. Hey, I want to watch the Rangers tonight. It will find what channel it's on and deliver it to you. Or you want to watch, Animal House for the 37th time. It will find whatever streaming service is on and deliver it to you.
And to the point that you have mentioned, John, hey, Andrew, Rangers are tied in the 7th. You want the rest of the game?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
$1.99. We're gonna charge it for you. Oh, by the way, and then they start to sell them. You get them in the ecosystem, and now again, you can see it with Fanatics. You can see it with season tickets. All these different things. Once you kind of get them in that universe, you have an opportunity to upsell those things. And again, one of the things you want to talk about a dynamic pricing. I've never got the answer from this, but was curious how much more the secondary market made off the A&M Texas game last year than A&M did from their original ticket sales, how those things went. It was probably maybe twice what those tickets worth, maybe even 3 times the value of the people who were selling their tickets on the market. And again, if you're A&M, you're trying to think, how do I get that money? That should be part of my deal.
Absolutely.
Or whoever, the home
it's the school and schools had resisted, but now schools are teaming up with the SeatGeeks and the StubHubs.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
As
exactly
opposed to
what
letting
Texas
them be
A&M
separate.
has.
When you see those
Texas
things,
A&M has a special deal with SeatGeek to make that very thing happen. SeatGeek and A&M share the revenue there, because they're forcing you at A&M to push your tickets off on SeatGeek. The easiest way to do it. You don't have to, but you really can be forcing people.
But that's another way
to go to SeatGeek as opposed to Ticketmaster or one of the others. And so why not? And therefore we have a revenue share.
When you know who those people are and you can market those tickets individually to somebody from that point, how valuable that's going to be. I mean, all of these things, these data points, there's a reason you see so many ticket companies out there and they're all making pretty good money at the end of the day. They figured this out. They know how to market those tickets to those fan bases and generate revenue. And that's what the college game's looking to try to do, is how do we, again, professionalize ourselves in some of these areas where we may not be as far along as the NFL or NBA is today.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. The personalization is huge. When I know that I'm wanted, I stay loyal. Right?
Absolutely.
And that's what you're saying with the data. They can do that. Yeah. By staying in that ecosystem. This one was fascinating. They all are. Who am I kidding? But always...
We want you, Andrew. We want you. Come on.
Yeah. Yes. Well, not exactly me. My wallet. Dr. Loftin, you have a great time in Alaska, my friend. Enjoy family, enjoy that wonderful weather, enjoy those great activities, and thank you for carving out time from your time to join us on this.
Pleasure, my friends. Always a pleasure.
You got it. John, a pleasure as well.
Always a pleasure to be with you, gentlemen.
Nick Savage is the producer. I am Andrew Monaco. We thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you on the next edition of College Sports Follow the Money. So long, everybody.